So there I was, Commander Jake Murphy of the United Earth Defense Force, standing in the most pretentious room I'd ever seen in my 15 years of space travel. And trust me, I've seen a lot of pretentious rooms. The Galactic Council chamber made Versailles look like a garage sale. The Council had come up with this brilliant idea for improving interspecies relations. And by brilliant, I mean completely insane. They called it the Apex Predator Summit. The concept was simple. Every species brings their most terrifying predator to show off their planet's evolutionary prowess. Because nothing says diplomacy like a bunch of aliens having a whose monster is scarier contest. I adjusted my uniform and tried not to make eye contact with the cargo pod hovering behind me. Inside was Earth's contribution to this circus, and I was already regretting every life choice that led me to this moment. Ambassador Thorvik went first, naturally. The Krylon warrior stood 12 feet tall, covered in scales that looked like they could deflect a missile, probably because they could. He gestured dramatically at his species' entry, and the containment field dropped. What emerged was a nightmare with 6 legs and too many teeth. The thing looked like someone crossed a tiger with a scorpion, and then asked it to bulk up at the gym for a few years. It roared, and I'm pretty sure 3 windows cracked. Behold, Thorvik bellowed, the Razorback Stalker of Krylon Prime, Apex Predator, undefeated champion of our death world. We are mighty because we conquered these beasts. Polite applause from the assembled delegates. I gave it a 6 out of 10. Good presentation, but a little heavy on the theatrics. Next up was Counselor Zen, representing the Kythian Hive Collective. The insectoid clicked its mandibles together in what I assumed was their version of a smile. It wasn't comforting. Our contribution, Zen buzzed, is the Swarm Render, a predator that hunts in perfect coordination with itself. The containment field flickered off, and about 50 wasp-sized creatures poured out, moving in patterns that hurt to look at. They formed shapes, spelled words in their own language, and generally showed off their hive mind party trick. Then they converged into one writhing mass that vaguely resembled something with claws. Creative. I'd give it a 7 out of 10. High Priestess Kvalera floated forward next, her bioluminescent petals pulsing with colors that probably meant something profound in her culture. The plant-based telepaths were always the most dramatic. From the consciousness gardens of Verdana, she sang, because apparently speaking normally wasn't an option. We present the Mind Thorn, a predator that hunts not the body, but the very essence of thought itself. Her creature looked like someone's nightmare of a Venus flytrap if it went to therapy and came back worse. Vines writhed, psychic energy crackled, and I definitely felt it poking around in my head before I slammed my mental shields up. 8 out of 10. Points for style. Then everyone turned to look at me. I took a deep breath. Behind me, the cargo pod made a concerning noise that definitely wasn't part of the plan. Right, I said, channeling every ounce of military professionalism I had left. Earth's apex predator. The most dangerous phase of the most dangerous species in our ecosystem. I hit the button. The containment field dropped. 3 seconds of silence. Is that... Thorvik rumbled. A tiny human? Not just any tiny human, I corrected, keeping my face absolutely straight. This is Tommy Rodriguez, age 3, Earth's true apex predator. Tommy looked around the room with the kind of fearless curiosity that should terrify anyone with survival instincts. He was wearing a dinosaur t-shirt, light-up sneakers, and holding a stuffed elephant that had seen better days. I want snacks, Tommy announced to the assembled representatives of 40 star systems. Counselor Zen's antennae twitched. In confusion. Commander Murphy, there must be some mistake. No mistake, I said, pulling out my datapad like I was about to give a PowerPoint presentation at a funeral. Let me explain why humanity's toddler phase represents the most formidable survival challenge in known space. Kvalera's petals dimmed skeptically. You cannot be serious. Deadly serious, I replied, as Tommy started wandering toward the Razorback Stalker with absolutely zero fear. Observe. This was either going to be the greatest presentation of my career or the shortest. Honestly, it could go either way. Tommy walked right up to Thorvik's Razorback Stalker like he was approaching a particularly large dog at a park. The 6-legged nightmare that had made 3 windows crack with its roar now looked deeply uncomfortable. Kitty, Tommy declared, reaching out with one sticky hand. The Razorback Stalker took a step back. Let me repeat that. The undefeated apex predator of a death world retreated from a 3-year-old in light-up shoes. Commander Murphy, Thorvik said slowly, his scales shifting to a color I'm pretty sure meant confused alarm in Krylon body language. What is the meaning of this? I tapped my datapad with the confidence of a man who had nothing left to lose. I'm glad you asked. You see, every species here has presented predators that hunt for survival. Efficient, logical, predictable. I paused for dramatic effect. Human toddlers operate on no logic whatsoever. They are chaos in its purest form. Tommy, as if on cue, completely ignored the massive alien monster and instead became fascinated with his own shoelaces. He sat down cross-legged right in front of the stalker and started untying them. They possess no fear, I continued, gesturing at Tommy like he was a museum exhibit. No concept of danger. And most terrifying of all, no understanding of the word no. This is absurd, Cavalera sang, her bioluminescent petals flashing irritation. A juvenile of any species is vulnerable, not predatory. Oh, you sweet summer flower, I said. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Tommy, buddy, show them why Mommy and Daddy need coffee. Tommy looked up at me with those big, innocent eyes that every parent knows are a trap. Why? Because I asked you to, champ. Why? Because we're doing a demonstration. Why? Because the nice aliens want to see what you can do. Why? Counselor Zen's antennae were now vibrating at a frequency that suggested deep discomfort. Is it malfunctioning? No, I said, checking my notes. This is tactical interrogation. He can keep this up indefinitely. The record is 4 hours and 17 minutes. The subject was his grandmother. She's still in therapy. Tommy had apparently gotten bored with the philosophical inquiry and had moved on to his next favorite activity, testing boundaries. Specifically, the containment field boundaries that were supposed to keep the apex predators separated from the viewing area. He walked right up to the shimmering energy barrier and poked it with one finger. The field flickered. That's a military-grade containment system, Thorvik said, his voice climbing an octave. It can hold a stalker at full rampage. Tommy poked it again. The field flickered more noticeably. Standard toddler ability, I explained, making notes on my datapad. They can sense structural weaknesses in any system through pure trial and error. Child-proof locks, defeated in minutes. Password-protected devices, cracked through random button mashing. The fabric of space-time itself? Well, we're about to find out. Tommy found the control panel on the side of the containment field. You know, the one that was supposed to be behind a locked access port 3 feet off the ground. He'd somehow climbed up using the stalker's own enclosure as a ladder. How did it get up there? Zen buzzed, the swarm render behind them swirling in agitated patterns. We don't know, I admitted. Toddlers violate several laws of physics on a regular basis. We've stopped questioning it. Tommy pressed a button. All the containment fields dropped simultaneously. For one beautiful, terrible moment, everyone froze. 3 apex predators, 40 alien delegates, and one extremely calm 3-year-old all occupied the same open space. The Razorback stalker looked at Tommy. Tommy looked at the Razorback stalker. Then Tommy smiled, picked up his sippy cup from God knows where he'd stashed it, and threw it with the accuracy of a drunk carnival game. The cup bounced off the stalker's snout. The apex predator of Kraylon Prime, undefeated champion of a death world, yelped and scrambled behind Thorvik's legs. What is happening? Thorvik roared. The swarm render tried next, forming into an intimidating shape and buzzing aggressively at Tommy. Standard predator intimidation display. Tommy responded by running directly at it with his arms spread wide, making a sound that I can only describe as a war cry crossed with a giggle. The swarm scattered in 47 different directions. Kvalara's mind thorn extended its psychic vines toward Tommy, probably trying to understand what it was dealing with. The vines touched his mind. The mind thorn immediately retracted, its petals wilting. Kvalara's own bioluminescence flickered rapidly in what I recognized as their version of a panic attack. What did you sense? Counselor Zen asked her urgently. Kvalara's voice came out strangled. Chaos. Pure, undiluted chaos. No pattern. No logic. Just an endless stream of consciousness about snacks, and dinosaurs, and why the sky is blue, and whether bugs have feelings, and demanding to know if it's tomorrow yet, and she made a sound like wind through broken glass. Make it stop. I cleared my throat. As I was saying, Earth's apex predator. The human toddler. Any questions? Tommy chose that moment to discover that the station's gravity controls were also mysteriously within his reach. Actually, Thorvik said, backing toward the exit as the gravity began fluctuating, I think we've seen enough. But I haven't even gotten to the tantrum demonstration yet, I called after him. I probably should have been more concerned about the situation. But honestly, this was going better than most playdates. The gravity stabilized at roughly 60% of normal, which meant Tommy was now bouncing around the council chamber like he'd just discovered trampolines for the first time. Which, given his delighted shrieking, he might as well have. Shall we continue with the formal presentation? I asked, pulling up my datapad like a teacher about to start a lecture while the classroom was actively on fire. Commander Murphy. Zen buzzed, all 47 components of their swarm render now hiding behind various pieces of furniture. Perhaps we should reschedule. Nonsense, I interrupted. We're just getting to the good part. Tommy, can you show the nice aliens your inside voice? Tommy stopped mid-bounce, looked directly at me, took a deep breath, and screamed at a frequency I'm pretty sure shattered the conceptual understanding of sound itself. The mind thorn's vines curled up into tight spirals. Kavalara made a whimpering noise that plants probably shouldn't be capable of making. Sonic warfare capabilities, I said loudly, over the continued screaming. Humans develop this ability around age 2 and refine it until approximately age 5. Note the sustained duration and the tactical deployment. Tommy finally stopped to take a breath. Why did you ask me to be quiet if you wanted me to be loud? He asked with the kind of innocent logic that could break a supercomputer. That's not. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Never mind, buddy. You're doing great. I know, Tommy said with the confidence of someone who had never experienced self-doubt in his entire life. Thorvik had regained some of his composure, though his razorback stalker was still cowering behind him like a very large, very deadly security blanket. Surely there must be some way to control these creatures? Oh, absolutely, I said. Would you like to try? The ambassador drew himself up to his full 12 feet of armored warrior glory. I have commanded armies. I have tamed the beasts of my world. One small human cannot be that difficult. Tommy, I called out. The big alien wants you to put your shoes back on. Tommy, who had somehow removed both shoes in the last 30 seconds despite them being Velcro, looked at Thorvik with an expression that I'd seen before. Usually right before a trip to the emergency room. No. Thorvik blinked. Child, I am Ambassador Thorvik of the Kraylon Empire. When I give a command. No. Tommy repeated, sitting down and crossing his arms. I am not asking. I am telling you. No. This is not a negotiation, small human. Tommy's lower lip started to tremble. His eyes got watery. His face began to scrunch up in a way that every parent in the galaxy would recognize as the point of no return. Oh no, I said helpfully. You've activated the emotional manipulation protocol. What are you? Thorvik started, right before Tommy burst into tears. Not just any tears. The big ones. The ones that come with hitching breaths, and a face that turns red and a sound that makes you want to give them literally anything they want just to make it stop. Make it cease, Thorvik commanded, his scales shifting to distressed purple. Can't, I said, checking my datapad. Once deployed, the crying sequence must run its natural course. Average duration, anywhere from 30 seconds to 3 hours. There's no way to predict which. Tommy cranked it up a notch, adding in the choking sobs that sound like he can't breathe. He could breathe fine. This was all performance. Kavalara's petals were now completely dimmed. The emotional psychic energy is overwhelming. How do your species survive exposure to this? Years of desensitization, I explained. By the time a human reaches adulthood, they've developed immunity to psychological warfare, sleep deprivation, and negotiating with terrorists. Because they've spent years doing all three with their own offspring, Counselor Zen's components were vibrating in discordant patterns. This is a nightmare. This is a Tuesday. I corrected. Tommy suddenly stopped crying, his face returning to normal in about half a second. He'd spotted something shiny on the other side of the room and was now laser-focused on obtaining it. And note the rapid emotional transitions. I continued my presentation. From rage to joy to despair and back again in seconds. Unpredictable. Impossible to counter. Highly effective. Tommy had reached the shiny object, which turned out to be part of the swarm render's containment control. He grabbed it with both hands. Don't touch that. Zen shrieked. Tommy looked at them, then at the controls, then back at them. He smiled, and pressed every button he could reach. The swarm render's enclosure began cycling through every containment protocol in rapid succession. Lights flashed, alarms blared. The individual components of the swarm began flying in panicked circles as their hive links scrambled. Stop him! Thorvik bellowed. I'm not going near him, I said reasonably. He hasn't had his snack yet. He's at peak chaos levels. The Razorback stalker, apparently deciding it had had enough, tried to make a run for the exit. Tommy saw the movement and, with the predatory instinct of a creature born to hunt, gave chase. Kitty, come back! A 600-pound apex predator fled from a 30-pound human child. Let that sink in. Kvalara had given up any pretense of dignity and had retracted into a protective ball, her petals completely closed. We yield, Earth wins. Please make it stop. Oh, we're not done yet, I said cheerfully, checking my schedule. We haven't even gotten to snack time. That's when things get really interesting. Tommy had cornered the Retigler stalker and was now trying to climb on its back. Horsey, he declared. The stalker looked at me with an expression that clearly said, help me. I shrugged. You're an apex predator. Figure it out. Somewhere in the station, another alarm started blaring. Tommy had found the environmental controls. This is fine, I said, making more notes on my datapad. This is all going according to plan. Thorvik's eye twitched. This is your plan? Sir, with all due respect, if you think this is bad, wait until he gets tired and refuses to take a nap. Tommy bounced past us, now riding the stalker like a very terrified horse, waving his stuffed elephant above his head. Faster, kitty! The apex predator of a death world obeyed without question. I mean, would you argue with him? The environmental controls, as it turned out, were Tommy's new favorite toy, which was unfortunate for everyone else in the room, and by everyone else I mean the entire station. Commander Murphy. A panicked voice crackled over the intercom. This is station security. We're showing multiple environmental system failures in the council chamber. What's your status? I glanced at Tommy, who was currently pressing buttons with the systematic thoroughness of someone defusing a bomb, except the exact opposite of that. Status is, fluid, I replied. Possibly gaseous. Definitely not solid. The temperature dropped 15 degrees in 3 seconds, then shot up 20 degrees. Then the lights switched to what I can only describe as disco mode. Is that the emergency pulse lighting? Thorvik asked, his scales now flickering between confused and alarmed so rapidly he looked like a malfunctioning Christmas tree. That's Tommy, I corrected, shouting over the alarm klaxons that had joined the party. He's discovered cause and effect. This is actually a crucial developmental milestone. You should feel honored to witness it. Tommy slapped another panel. The gravity inverted. We all hit the ceiling. Well, most of us. Tommy, having the center of gravity of a bowling ball and the survival instincts of someone who'd never heard of consequences, was having the time of his life floating in the middle of the room. Again, he shrieked with joy. Please no. Kvalara whimpered from her position stuck to the ceiling, her vines dangling down like the world's saddest chandelier. The gravity reversed again. We crashed back to the floor. The razorback stalker made a sound I didn't know creatures could make while experiencing existential crisis. Station security to council chamber. The intercom crackled again. We're sending a team to contain the situation. I wouldn't recommend that, I said, watching Tommy discover that spinning in circles made the lights do interesting things. Commander, with respect, we're trained professionals. So am I, and I'm not going near him until he asks for juice. The doors hissed open. 6 members of station security entered, representing 4 different species, all armed with various forms of non-lethal containment equipment. Tommy stopped spinning and looked at them with the calculating gaze of a general surveying the battlefield. Oh no, I muttered. Can't be that bad, the team leader said, a Vorgon with more confidence than sense. It's just one small. Tommy's face scrunched up. Tactical meltdown incoming. I dove behind Thorvik's stalker, which at this point had accepted its fate as my emotional support apex predator. What came out of Tommy was less of a sound and more of a weaponized emotional event. It was crying, yes, but also screaming, and somehow involved throwing himself on the floor with the dramatic flair of a Shakespearean actor dying in the final scene. But here's the thing about toddler tantrums that non-parents don't understand. They're not just loud, they're psychically devastating. Kvalara, being a telepathic species, got hit first. The emotions, she wailed. So much rage over nothing. The injustice of being told no. The betrayal of insufficient snacks. I can't. She passed out, her bioluminescence flickering weakly. The swarm render, operating on hive mind coordination and logical patterns, completely lost cohesion when exposed to Tommy's absolutely chaotic emotional state. The components started flying in random directions, bumping into walls, each other, and one very unfortunate security officer. Counselor Zen clutched their head. The pattern, there is no pattern. Just chaos and tiny shoes, and demanding dinosaur nuggets, which apparently are different from regular nuggets. But I don't understand how. The security team lasted approximately 45 seconds before retreating in. Disarray. Told you, I said to the intercom. Tommy was now in full tantrum mode, which meant he'd progressed beyond crying into that phase where toddlers forget why they're upset but are committed to the bit anyway. He was rolling around on the floor, occasionally kicking his feet, and screaming something that might have been words in another dimension. The mind thorn tried to wrap a vine around him, probably thinking it could just gently restrain the child. The vine touched Tommy's aura of pure chaos. The mind thorn's petals began wilting in real time, turning brown and crispy like someone had hit fast forward on a nature documentary about death. My predator, Kvalara whispered weakly from her unconscious position. It's dying of existential horror. First time? I asked sympathetically. Thorvik had given up entirely and was now sitting on the floor, his massive warrior frame looking utterly defeated. We conquered worlds, he said quietly. We fought wars that lasted generations. We tamed beasts that could shatter mountains. He looked at Tommy, who was now banging his fists on the floor and screaming about something that might have been want mommy, or might have been yogurt, or honestly could have been anything. How do you live like this? Coffee, I said simply. Lots and lots of coffee. The razorback stalker had curled up in the corner, its 6 legs wrapped around itself, making itself as small as possible. Every few seconds it whimpered. Tommy's tantrum was reaching its crescendo. The alarms were blaring in harmony with his screams. The lights were strobing. The gravity was fluctuating in time with his kicks. And then, right at the peak of the chaos, right when every being in the room had lost all hope, Tommy stopped. Just like that. Dead silence. He sat up, rubbed his eyes, and yawned. Sleepy, he announced. Then he crawled over to the razorback stalker, who was too paralyzed with fear to move, and used the apex predator as a pillow, and fell immediately asleep. The sudden silence was deafening. Is it? Thorvik whispered, afraid to speak. Too loudly. Is it over? For now, I said. He'll be out for about an hour. Then he'll wake up like nothing happened and want a snack. Zen's antennae drooped. This is your species' childhood? All of you survive this? Not just survive, I said, pulling myself to my feet and straightening my uniform. We do it on purpose, usually more than once. My parents did it 3 times. Why? Kvalara croaked. That, I said, is an excellent question that we're still trying to answer. The council chamber looked like a war zone, which, to be fair, it basically was. Scorch marks on the walls from the lighting malfunctions, control panels sparking, one very traumatized razorback stalker being used as a toddler bed, and 40 alien delegates looking like they'd just witnessed the end of civilization. Tommy snored peacefully, one hand clutching his stuffed elephant, the other tangled in the stalker's fur. The apex predator didn't dare move. I pulled up my datapad and continued like I was wrapping up a perfectly normal presentation. So, to summarize, the human toddler, peak chaos entity, 0 self-preservation instincts, maximum emotional damage output. Any questions? Thorvik raised one shaking hand. How, he said slowly, do your people not go extinct during this phase? Ah, excellent question. I tapped my screen, bringing up what looked like survival statistics. Human adult durability is directly correlated with childhood survival rates. See, while Tommy here is causing mayhem, his parents are at home dealing with 2 older siblings. They've been in the trenches for 8 years. 8 years? Zen's components shuddered in unison. Well, the toddler phase is only about 3 years per child, but most humans have multiple offspring. It's like we heard about the nightmare difficulty setting and thought, you know what? Let's do it again. Kvalara had managed to revive slightly, though her petals were still looking rough. But why? Surely one of these creatures is sufficient to drive a species to madness? I smiled. That's the thing you're all missing. This isn't a bug in our evolution. It's a feature. I walked around the sleeping Tommy like a professor giving a lecture. Every human adult you'll ever meet has survived years of this. Years of sleep deprivation. Toddlers wake up at random intervals and refuse to go back to sleep. Years of negotiating with someone who doesn't understand logic, reason, or the concept of consequences. Years of having their possessions destroyed, their patience tested, and their sanity questioned on an hourly basis. Thorvik was listening now, his warrior instincts recognizing a tactical briefing when he heard one. What you witnessed today, I continued, was basic training. Human parenting is the most intensive psychological warfare preparation program in the known galaxy. By the time we're done raising our children, we've been conditioned to handle any crisis with patience, creative problem-solving under extreme stress, and the ability to function on minimal sleep. I gestured at Tommy. He's not our apex predator. He's our training program. And every single adult human has graduated from it, either as a parent, sibling, teacher, or just someone who's been in the same room as a toddler having a meltdown in a grocery store. Counselor Zen's antennae perked up slightly. You're saying humans intentionally expose themselves to this chaos to become stronger? Not intentionally at first, I admitted. But evolution figured out that any species that could survive their own children could probably survive anything. We've built entire support systems around it, parenting groups, coffee shops on every corner, entire industries dedicated to child-proofing things that toddlers will defeat anyway. The futility, Kvalara whispered. The beautiful, terrifying futility. Exactly. We know we can't win. We know they'll find a way to cause chaos no matter what we do. So we adapt, we learn, we develop patience that borders on supernatural. We master the art of staying calm while everything around us is actively on fire. I pulled up another slide. Human negotiators? Trained by toddlers who can argue for 3 hours about why they don't want to wear pants. Human soldiers? Conditioned to function on 2 hours of sleep because that's a good night when you have a teething infant. Human engineers? Learned creative problem-solving by child-proofing houses against tiny humans who can defeat any lock through pure determination and chaos. Thorvik stood up slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. You're not showing us your predator. You're showing us your crucible. Now you're getting it, I said. Every human you meet has been forged in this fire. We've all survived the unsurvivable. We've all negotiated with terrorists who can't even speak in complete sentences. We've all experienced psychological warfare from someone who weaponizes emotions they don't even fully understand yet. I looked around the room at the assembled delegates. You brought predators that hunt for food, for territory, for survival. We brought the thing that hunts our sanity, our sleep, our possessions, and our last shred of dignity. And we don't just survive it, we do it with love. Tommy shifted in his sleep, murmuring something about dinosaurs. The razorback stalker whimpered softly but didn't move. So when you look at humanity and wonder why we're so resilient, so adaptable, so hard to break, I closed my datapad. Remember that we all started here, with chaos in light-up shoes. Zen was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, we understand now why the galaxy should fear humanity. Oh, you still don't fully get it, I said with a smile. I mentioned I have 3 kids at home, right? The color drained from Thorvik's scales. 3, he repeated. 3 of these creatures. Simultaneously. Well, not simultaneously anymore. The oldest is 8. But yeah, for a while there, we had 3. Under 5. I shrugged. My wife and I are basically invincible at this point. Nothing phases us. Diplomatic crisis? Please. I've handled a double tantrum in the cereal aisle of a supermarket. Hostage negotiation? Child's play compared to convincing a 4-year-old to eat vegetables? Psychological torture? I once listened to Baby Shark on repeat for 6 hours. Kvalara made a sound like wind through a graveyard. Baby Shark? You don't want to know, I said quickly. Trust me on this one. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened approximately 30 minutes later, after the maintenance crews had partially restored the environmental controls, and someone had brought me a very large cup of coffee. Tommy was still asleep on his apex predator pillow, which had made moving to the council's secondary chamber a bit complicated. The stalker had to come too. It was too scared to stay behind, and too scared to wake Tommy up by moving. High Chancellor Vrixton, a crystalline being who'd been watching the whole disaster via video feed, called the session to order with all the enthusiasm of someone scheduling their own execution. Let the record show, he said, his facets refracting light in what I assumed was deep regret, that we have witnessed Earth's submission to the Apex Predator Summit. He paused. Does anyone wish to contest Earth's entry? The silence was profound. Any objections whatsoever? Thorvik raised his hand. I move that we immediately classify human juveniles as Class 5 chaotic entities under the Galactic Threat Assessment Protocol. Seconded, Kvalara said weakly, still looking like she'd been through a botanical war. All in favor? Every single delegate raised their hand, tentacle, vine, or appropriate appendage. Motion passes unanimously, Chancellor Vrixton said. Furthermore, I am adding a corollary motion, that Earth be granted an immediate exemption from any future Apex Predator competitions. Agreed, Councillor Zen buzzed. We have seen enough. More than enough. Too much. I also move, Thorvik continued, standing with the gravitas of someone making a historical declaration, that the Council formally acknowledged that invading Earth would be a catastrophically stupid idea. There was a murmur of agreement. Not just because of their military, Thorvik continued. Not because of their technology or their tactics, but because any species that voluntarily reproduces these creatures and survives is not a species we want to fight. Imagine, Kvalara added, her voice still shaky, an entire planet of beings who have endured years of this, who consider this normal, who do this to themselves multiple times and call it family planning. They build monuments to patience, Zen observed. They have sayings about it. Phrases like terrible twos and threenager that suggest they've categorized and studied this phenomenon for generations. And they still keep doing it, Thorvik said, shaking his head. That's not courage. That's not bravery. That's something beyond our comprehension. Chancellor Vrixton's facets dimmed thoughtfully. Commander Murphy, does Earth understand what an advantage they have? I shrugged. Most humans just think we're tired all the time. We don't really think of parenting as military training. It's just, life. Just life, the Chancellor repeated. Raising chaos entities that can defeat military-grade containment fields and cause psychological damage to telepathic species is just life. Pretty much, yeah. He was quiet for a moment. Then, the motion passes. Let it be recorded in perpetuity. Earth is not to be invaded, provoked, or unnecessarily antagonized. Any species foolish enough to attack a planet full of beings trained by these creatures deserves whatever happens to them. Hear, hear, several delegates chorused. Tommy chose that exact moment to wake up. He sat up, rubbed his eyes, and looked around at all the assembled aliens with the kind of instant alertness that toddlers have despite having been unconscious 30 seconds ago. Ice cream? He asked hopefully. Every delegate took an involuntary step backward. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. Buddy, we don't have ice cream right now. Tommy's face began to scrunch. Wait, I said quickly, holding up my hands. But we can get ice cream if you're a good boy for 5 more minutes. The scrunch paused. Tommy considered this. Chocolate? Absolutely. With sprinkles. Okay. Tommy climbed off the stalker, who remained motionless like a soldier who'd just survived a war and couldn't quite believe it was over. I let out a breath. I didn't know I'd been holding. Behind me, I heard Thorvik whisper something that sounded like a prayer. Well, I said, picking up Tommy and settling him on my hip with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Unless there's any other business, I think we'll be heading back to Earth. Please do, Chancellor Vrixton said. And Commander Murphy? Yes? On behalf of the entire Galactic Council, thank you for not bringing all 3 of your children. I grinned. You're welcome, although my wife did offer. She thought it would be funnier. The horror on their faces was beautiful. Your wife, Kvalara said faintly, has a sense of humor about this? You have to, I said. Otherwise you'd never survive it. That's another thing we learn. Laugh or cry, and laughing uses fewer tissues. Tommy waved goodbye to the stalker. Bye-bye, kitty. The stalker closed its eyes, possibly praying to whatever god's apex predators believed in. As I carried Tommy toward the exit, I heard Counselor Zen say quietly, we need to update our xenobiology textbooks. Under humans, we should add, warning, do not engage. Especially the small ones. Agreed, Thorvik rumbled. We conquered death worlds. We mastered interstellar travel. We built empires across galaxies. But this? He gestured at the disaster zone that was the N, those an M. Council chamber. This is beyond us. I paused at the doorway and looked back one last time. For what it's worth, you all did better than most new parents on their first day. At least nobody cried. I cried, Kvalara admitted. On the inside, where my emotions live. That counts, I said sympathetically. Tommy tugged on my collar. Daddy, when ice cream? Right now, buddy, right now. As we left the council chamber, I heard the Chancellor say, meeting adjourned. Someone get the stalker some therapy, and someone else update our threat assessment database. Humanity just moved up several tiers. Which tier? Someone asked. All of them, came the reply. I smiled and adjusted Tommy on my hip. Another successful day of interspecies diplomacy. My wife was going to love this story, although I was definitely leaving out the part where I'd promised Tommy ice cream with sprinkles. She'd specifically said no sugar before dinner. But that was a problem for future me. Present me had just successfully convinced the entire Galactic Council that humanity was too crazy to invade. And honestly, they weren't wrong. We were a species that looked at the most chaotic force in our ecosystem and decided to raise them with love, patience, and an ungodly amount of coffee. If that wasn't terrifying, I don't know what was. Daddy? Tommy asked as we walked toward the docking bay. Yeah, buddy? Why do aliens look funny? I laughed. That, kiddo, is a very good question. Why? And just like that, we were off again. Somewhere behind us, I heard the faint sound of the Galactic Council groaning in unison. Yeah, Humanity was going to be just fine.